Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. It's the day after the election. Donald Trump has won, and I'm talking to my friend Jack Hunter with BasedPolitics about the libertarian opportunities in this new administration. We are both white-pilled, optimistic, maybe romantically so, but starting with freeing Ross Ulbricht on day one. Check it out. Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Hey, Jack, you're looking bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning. How late were you up last night?
I was up to about 2:30, and it's all about all you could take, and then I passed out. Here we are this morning talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, interesting night, and I want to lead with the obvious point that perhaps nobody else is talking about. This is justice for Peanut. I think the Peanut memes made all the difference, and I'm joking about that, but I think it captured people's angst with lockdown authoritarianism and the sort of unchecked blank check power that public health bureaucrats have, where they can literally kick down your door and murder your pet. So I don't think it's a small thing. Obviously, there was a lot else going on, but what's your hot take on the election last night?
Well, God, who knows where to start? We'll start here. From a bird's eye view, broad perspective, the people who were heavily emotionally invested in Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, that ticket winning, have imagined, have mythologized, however you want to describe it, a Donald Trump that Donald Trump's messed up. Like, he's a narcissist. There's lots of things I don't like about him, but what they've imagined is just not true. They call this guy Adolf Hitler, a fascist. He's going around like things that had never happened in his first term, didn't come close to happening, and highly likely will happen in the second term. But that's where they're at mentally. So they're freaking out that this person that they've just kind of invented won again. So the people who support Donald Trump see people like that who are in charge of CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post and all of legacy media, who all have that basic bizarre attitude and view of this man, and they see that inflation is high. They see that their tax dollars are going to Ukraine and not the victims of Hurricane Helene. Arab Americans in Michigan see what's going on in Gaza and a Democratic administration that's not doing much about it, and a Republican candidate who was a former president coming and talking to them directly about how he might stop that through diplomacy. I know that's a broad swath of things to say, but my broader statement would be Democrats who imagine this thing that isn't true, who are absolutely distraught today. I get it if that's what you believe, but it's just based on pure fantasy. And there's Americans who put Donald Trump over the finish line who are resistance to elites who think they don't matter, think they're stupid, don't really care about their plight, won through this imperfect vessel that is Donald Trump. I think that's what happened today. And I'm a libertarian, you're a libertarian. Some of us can see it, but hell, a lot of libertarians are afflicted by the same Trump derangement syndrome that the lefties are talking about. But I think if you're of a certain political perspective, I voted for Donald Trump for the first time in this election. I did not vote for him in 2016 or 2020. I voted for Gary Johnson and Joe Jorgensen. But for some of the reasons I just explained, I did. And I'm happy about that. This broad ideological coalition that includes people like former Democrats Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan to a degree. I got a lot of hope for that in terms of peace and just protecting basic liberalism with free speech being at the top of that. So people can say I'm crazy or whatever, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and but by the way, I think anecdotally, and I'm sure eventually data will bear this out, that I think a lot of libertarians, small L and big L, did cross over and support Trump this time. And I do think that the New Resistance MAHA movement had everything to do with that. I think it changed the dynamics of who the Trump coalition is. But I want to go back to a point, and I agree with you 100% that I think it's wildly irresponsible when we as libertarians could point out all sorts of government authoritarianism, and even flavors of the F word, not just in some of Trump's policies, but every freaking president in my lifetime. If you understand fascism to be government control of industry, government control of the means of production, government jawboning of corporations. I mean, this is not new, and it's a real thing. But when you're throwing that word around so casually, people stop listening to you. And I wonder. I was thinking about Barack and Michelle Obama have been so outspoken about the catastrophic climate crisis that we're facing, while they're building a multi-zillion-dollar mansion on the shore in Martha's Vineyard. I got to wonder if Joe Scarborough, I assume you watched some of his more unhinged rants last night about Donald Trump wanting to line up Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad, which was a complete ridiculous. It just a made up fantasy. And surely he's smart enough to know that, but maybe he's deluded himself. But if he doesn't pack up and flee the country for fear of getting put in a Trump death camp, we'll know that he was just lying to the American people. And I think a lot of Americans feel like this over the top accusations does not bear any resemblance to reality.
Well, I think that's accurate. Matt, I agree with you. I don't think Joe Scarborough is a dumb person. I think he's a smart person. I don't think your intelligence level has anything to do with how people react to this. Like, the dumbest people can react in a certain way, and people who are intelligent, you would think would know better, can react in the same goofy way. And Joe Scarborough is a prime example of that. I did not vote for Barack Obama in 2008 on principle, but I deeply, and I said this publicly at the time, I wrote a column about it, wanted Barack Obama to defeat John McCain, because I thought the neoconservative narrative, the neoconservative ideology of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney needed to go away, needed to be discredited, dismissed, and stomped into the ground. And I was happy when Obama won. Now, he did a lot of things. He betrayed a lot of what he campaigned on in 2008, but that's how I felt. In this election, Trump, for all his flaws, I wanted him and voted for him to defeat Kamala Harris for the exact same reasons I wanted Obama to defeat John McCain. It was to discredit the Dick Cheney endorsed, the Liz Cheney endorsed, the Bill Kristol endorsed, the entire major high-profile neoconservative endorsed ticket of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, because they stood for the same foreign policy, the same ideology. And I don't say that just because they endorsed that. These people endorsed them. They said that over and over and over. Every Democrat that says, well, they just agree on protecting democracy. No. Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris said time and time again, we have the same foreign policy outlook and will operate accordingly. And I'm so glad that Donald Trump, who's got a lot of problems, beat her ass last night for that reason. Same reason with Obama and McCain.
So I'm going to assume that you did not find Tim Walz's argument that having Dick Cheney in their camp was a permission, I think is the word he used, for constitutional conservatives and libertarians to cross the aisle and join the team. Like that, I've never met someone that so misunderstood libertarianism as that guy.
How's it? So Tim Walz is the guy that called J.D. Vance weird. That's where that started, right? Tim Walz is like the weirdest guy ever. And to your point, Matt, how politically obtuse do you have to be to think, oh, we have Dick Cheney on our side, now libertarians are going to be for us? He doesn't know anything. Thank God. I mean, he's dumber than her. Good God. Thank God they lost. I mean, anybody pays attention to politics for 10 seconds, and he's a governor, would know that. And he doesn't. He just doesn't.
Yeah, there is, in my read, my mindset is very much where you are. And I want to get into the increasing futility of third parties as someone that has spent a good part of the last 5-6 years trying to make third parties more viable. It's grown quite futile, but I think one of the headlines for me, and I tweeted this morning, and I've been waiting for this revolution to happen for years. The laptop class lost, and the non-essential workers won this election, and I think that encapsulates more than just the lockdown industrial complex. It encapsulates the elitism of people that have been quite comfortable even under this insane inflationary binge that has been doubled down on by the Biden administration. They don't worry about their grocery bills. They don't lose their jobs when we lock down the world. They don't have anxiety about these things. And so one of the things that I think is as close as you can get to an iron law in politics is when the economy sucks this bad, and disposable income and inflation and the cost of groceries and your economic insecurity about the future for yourself and your family, when those are top of mind, the incumbent loses. And that has happened every time in my lifetime. And as much as Kamala tried to have it both ways, where she was not the incumbent, but still wanted the trappings of incumbency at the same time, I think it, even with all the other stupid in this election, it would have been difficult for her to overcome that.
I agree with that. And to be the change candidate when you're the sitting vice president of the dude that they associate with non-change is just weird. And that played out in how people voted. Look, there's a lot of things we could say. Democrat voters who were so invested in Kamala Harris winning, they wouldn't put it this way, but this is true. If you like the status quo, if whether it's inflation, any of it, if you like the status quo, she was your candidate. You were there to protect America's foreign policy, our economic policy, just everything as it is. That's who you voted for. Donald Trump, the reason so many establishment types were against him, whether it's the neoconservatives, Democratic elites, is because he's a disruptor. Now, disruption can be bad. Some things might not need to be disrupted, but I think there's a lot of voters in the United States who think a lot of things need disrupting, and he was the candidate to do that. And that's why I think things turned out the way that they did yesterday. Another thing I would bring up, Matt, I've started off with foreign policy because I'm a Ron Paul libertarian. I hate neocons with every ounce of my being. And let's see what you feel about it. Maybe I'm deranged in some ways. I've always said I had Bush derangement syndrome till the day I died, not Trump derangement syndrome. But another reason I'm glad things turned out the way they did, I know, basic liberalism, especially the issue of free speech, has been under attack over the last few years. And what I mean by that is, look, Trump says stupid stuff like, I want to put people who want to burn the American flag in jail for a year. That's totally anti-First Amendment, anti-free speech. Republicans like Ron DeSantis want to shut down pro-Palestinian protesters on campuses. That's so anti-First Amendment, anti-pro-free speech. But there's lots of forces saying, no, you can't do that. And not just Democrats. There's libertarians like me like, no, you can't do that. The Supreme Court will say you can't do that. On the Democratic side, you have a consensus now. If I talk to my average Democratic friend, I'm like, do you believe in free speech and the First Amendment? They'll say, of course I do. And I say, well, what about misinformation and hate speech? They're like, well, we got to regulate that. That's a consensus. That's from Kamala Harris to the guy who lives to me next door who voted for her yesterday is upset this morning. That's what they believe. And they were willing to implement that. You heard Tim Walz in this election say that misinformation and hate speech are not protected by the First Amendment. You heard Kamala Harris say that the Department of Justice should be sicked on social media platforms that allow misinformation and hate speech. You heard Hillary Clinton, the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee and former Secretary of State and former First Lady of the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton, say that if you practice misinformation, maybe there should be criminal charges and jail involved. That's where that party is, and they don't see it as they're against free speech. They see it as normal. When the when the idea of a disinformation governance board was floated, a federal agency, a federal government that would police and regulate our speech and punish accordingly was floated, most Democrats were like, either I don't care, maybe this is a good idea. And people like me were freaking out, like, George Orwell's here, the Ministry of Truth, 1984. When that's a consensus in the Democratic Party and they see nothing wrong with it, you need to lose for the defense of basic liberalism in the way that we're libertarians. We're liberals, small L liberals.
I have exciting news. Our latest documentary, The Free Life, Portrait of an Artist, a project that we've been working on for several years here at Free the People, is finally available to view. This is a story of my friend Carlos Luna, an artist who had to flee communist Cuba in order to create the beautiful things that he does now in Miami, Florida. His grandmother actually told him, you must leave if you want to create your art. It's a beautiful story. It's a hero's journey. And you have an opportunity now to see it for the very first time. Go to watch.freethepeople.org. It's $9.99. This is the first time you'll be able to see it. We've been showing it at film festivals. We've been winning awards. Now you have your chance. I'm eager to hear what you think about it. So check it out. Watch.freethepeople.org. But by the way, if you're not wanting to slog through a bunch of policy conversations and ideological conversations and philosophical conversations about what is the right side for a libertarian to be on, one of the proxies I use is Hillary Clinton. And whatever she is for, I know that she's wrong. So I just have to be on the other side of that, because she's almost like a comic book monster when it comes to trampling civil liberties and her thirst for war and her authoritarian attitude. And I think for those of you out there, like when you see Hillary Clinton going after cryptocurrency and embracing central bank digital currency, you know that is the fight that we need to fight. And so she does us a favor by being a caricature of every libertarian's worst nightmare.
She's a smarter version of Kamala Harris in that she has all the same positions as Kamala Harris, but she's intentional about it because she knows.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the courting of the libertarian vote and the opportunity for libertarians the day after the election, which is today. And I want to go all the way back to, and I've talked about this before, and I talked about it a week and a half ago when I did my landscape about where libertarians should be positioning themselves the day after the election. But go all the way back to PorcFest. I guess when Kennedy spoke, it was during the primaries, so I guess a year and a half ago. About that, yeah. And Tara and I went to that speech, and it was controversial to have RFK Jr. speak at PorcFest, and in classic libertarian style, a few of the more hardcore libertarians protested that. But I liked being romanced, and I very much enjoyed hearing RFK Jr. give what I believe to be, you can go back and watch it on YouTube, what I believe to be one of the most libertarian speeches that I have ever heard from a viable candidate for president of any party. And it was clearly a bidding war had started. And I talked to Vivek Ramaswamy from the PorcFest stage when they were both running for president at the time, and he was also very interested in reaching libertarianish voters, obviously, particularly in New Hampshire. RFK Jr. then goes to Freedom Fest that year, and eventually, not only RFK, but Donald Trump shows up at the Libertarian National Convention. And that, of course, was controversial as well. But the fact that politicians are courting the libertarian vote, let's say they're pandering to the libertarian vote, let's say they're making promises, this is a good thing. Does it mean they'll keep those promises? Not at all, unless we continue to engage and pressure and advocate for those same policies. But I want to say that something fundamental shifted when RFK and then Elon Musk and Nicole Shanahan and Brett Weinstein, and the list goes on and on and on, when those people, formerly of the left, decided to join the Trump coalition with their own brand, MAHA, not MAGA. That changed the complexion of the Trump coalition, again, in a way that I think is a huge opportunity for libertarians.
Agree. I think it's healthy and exciting. It was actually my first Pork Fest this year, believe it or not, being in this movement as long as we both have been. And I really loved it. Can't wait to go back next year. I think this coalition that is coalesced around Donald Trump, who once again has many flaws, but I say that, Matt, because people hear me say things favorable, like, oh, you're a Trumpkin, you're super MAGA. I'm not. This is the first time I voted for him. I voted for Gary Johnson twice and Joe Jorgensen, and who obviously was a Ron Paul supporter, and his son Rand Paul and all the rest. I think the Libertarian Party in particular right now is the most interesting it has ever been to me as a former Libertarian Party voter in the presidential elections. I like this idea that Angela McArdle has about building coalitions and using the small leverage that big L libertarians have in politics to get libertarian results. If Ross Ulbricht's sentence is commuted, as Trump has vowed twice, as a favor to libertarians in the Libertarian Party, it will be the greatest accomplishment in the history of that party. People can get pissed off about that. They can get mad about that. But I can tell you who won't be mad about that. His name is Ross Ulbricht and his mother. That will be a big deal. We got something out of that. He got his freedom, which he deserves, because of what we did politically or what the LP did politically, and we supported or whatever. Having a libertarian in the cabinet, they promised that. We'll see if that happens. And, none of this might not happen, and we'll talk about it, raise hell about it. That's how democracy works. But the idea that trying is bad or trying to do this is bad, and look, I like Chase Oliver. I think he was a good candidate in many ways, and it is what it is. But, I voted. Matt, this is the first time I've voted for a major party presidential candidate since Bob Dole in 1996. And I did that because my first choice, Pat Buchanan, told me to, and I was 19. So it's not like I'm, Republican, Democrat, I'm all, no.
So you're saying that Pat Buchanan was not always right?
Right, you were wrong about Bob Dole. But that's my point. I voted third party. It was a Libertarian Party or a Constitution Party a few times. But where we are right now with people like RFK, what the Libertarian Party is doing and trying to coordinate with the Trump campaign, we'll see what comes of that. I have high hopes, and I'll be very disappointed if some of those hopes aren't met. But that's politics. This is a different time and day, and libertarians who are disgusted with this were just like, if you're a libertarian, you're mad that Trump frees Ross, I don't know what to tell you. You've lost the plot. Hopefully there's less of those people than I anticipate there being. But
by the way, and I've said this, and I want to get your reaction to it, but freeing Ross in and of itself is an act of justice that I think is going to be wildly satisfying to any of us that have followed his persecution through all these years. But freeing Ross is symbolic of a major policy agenda that Trump has broadly embraced, including opposition to central bank digital currency, opposition to Elizabeth Warren's attempts to destroy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And Ross was the canary in the coal mine. He was the first one saying that I'm gonna create a website where people can securely and privately exchange through some of these emergent technologies. So freeing Ross is an indication of the defeat of a broad policy agenda that is wildly authoritarian. And one of the elements that we mentioned Elon Musk, but Trump's successful courtship of the constituency, I'll call the tech bros, but certainly the crypto bros, not all, but like there was a significant shift from where they had been in Trump's direction. So again, you have a lot of people that are pushing Trump in ways that was just simply not true the first time he ran for president. And I would say, like, the freeing Ross on day one is a good test for where we're going to be. The other test, and this also, I can come up with a very happy scenario in terms of the types of people that the Trump transition embraces for key positions in government. And first of all, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are intimately involved in that transition team. They wisely rejected the deep state's help on the transition. And I wonder if, could you see Tulsi in a senior position? Could you see her at DOD? Could you see RFK Jr. at, my dream job for him is the CIA. That's probably too much to hope for, but certainly the FDA. Thomas Massie at the Department of Agriculture. Vivek Ramaswamy has been floated for Homeland Security, and of course the Elon Ron Paul coalition that says they're going to go after government efficiency. And when I hear Elon Musk talk about government efficiency, I'm thinking about what he did to Twitter, which is cutting 80% of it, and that's a start. We can start there.
Yes. I don't know if you got to listen to Elon Musk's interview with Joe Rogan that happened yesterday, I guess, or whatever. He interviewed Trump, obviously, then Vance and Musk and everybody in that orbit. But what he was talking about, I guess it's the government efficiency department or whatever, whatever they're going to call it. Ron Paul volunteered to help with that. Elon Musk seemed invited to that. All exciting stuff. But the one thing that Musk said to me that resonated, our friend Don Devine was known as Reagan's swift sword for cutting so many federal workers, just like immediately, which was awesome if you're somebody that wants to shrink government. But what Musk said intrigued me. He said, there's so many government offices basically that are useless, just exist, that nobody's going to do anything about. We will cut. But when we get rid of these people, I'll give them like 3-year severance or something. That sounds a lot better, right? Because Rogan was making the point of, well, these people have existed their whole life with basically no value to the market and living off the government if they've worked there for 30 years. And he's correct. And I'm not trying to insult them. I don't blame anybody for feeding their family however they can. But that's probably a reality. And I think that's pretty humane of Musk to say, well, this stuff's got to go in the long run, but this is how we'll pad it. So creative government shrinking. I hadn't thought about that part of it, but he has. And yeah, I agree with you, Matt. When I hear that, I think of what he did with Twitter, where he got rid of so much of the staff that didn't need to be there and just, unleash this free speech platform that was genuinely free speech. If Tulsi is never in Trump's cabinet, if RFK is never in Trump's cabinet, I hope they both are. If Vivek is never in Trump's cabinet, I hope he is. Trump has enough people around him that did not exist in his first term to sway him away, rather, from people like John Bolton and others who those of us would prefer not to see around him. The Ron Paul Institute, Ron Paul does obviously his great daily videos about current affairs. The one he did yesterday was basically don't empower neocons when you're in office. And Elon Musk retweeted Ron Paul and said, yeah, we shouldn't empower neocons. All of those are encouraging things. When Dave Smith recently endorsed Ron Paul, especially over the Cheney stuff, he goes, I know Donald Trump's going to suck. He's going to do bad things, but here's the dynamic and why I'm supporting him. And I'll be repeating myself to repeat all that. Yeah, he's going to do some things I disagree with, but I'm optimistic about some things that would never have happened under a President Mitt Romney or John McCain or, any of these conventional Republicans, and certainly not under conventional Democrats that we might see under Trump for libertarian purposes. I'm optimistic.
Regular viewers of Kibbe on Liberty already know how obsessed I have been with the pandemic industrial complex and all of the stupid, authoritarian, and downright evil things that the government did to us during COVID-19. Well, I'm proud to announce a new investigative series that looks to get to the bottom of all of that. It's called The Coverup, and I'm producing it in cooperation with BlazeTV. The only place you're going to see this is BlazeTV, so go to FauciCoverup.com/Kibbe and use the code FauciLied for $30 off your annual subscription. Do it now. The truth is out there. I shouldn't have to say this either, but I'll make it very clear as someone that's been trying to downsize government and defend liberty my entire professional career. I am not naive about what it'll take. The power of all of the vested interests that have been feeding at the trough of government power, particularly the military intelligence industrial complex. This is a worthy adversary. If you actually want to do something about government efficiency, if you want to tackle the debt, if you want to try to balance the budget, if you want to reprioritize dollars where they're needed most, you can't do it without taking on endless war. And that's why the addition, I mean, I think Elon Musk is already there, but the addition of Ron Paul, and Ron Paul constantly pointing out that Donald Trump's friend Mike Pompeo is a fundamental problem if you actually want to accomplish some of these goals. I'm not naive about any of it, but I'm also romantic enough to know that we have to try. And that I've always thought that the day after the election in many ways is more important than the day before the election, because a lot of people will sort of rally the troops and maybe they succeed in electing their guy, but then they go home exhausted the day after the election, sleep in on Wednesday and say, my job is done, I elected the right guy. And of course, that's not how politics or policy works. We're expecting people to do the right thing. I'm expecting people to do the right thing only because they have to. And they have to because public opinion and grassroots coalitions and influencer advocacy, all this stuff that got us to where we are today, that stuff has to continue. And I this is one thing I'll shout out to Angela McArdle. One thing she is fundamentally right about is that libertarians, if they want to be effective, are going to have to get better at coalition building. They're going to have to find people on the left and people on the right and independents in the middle and other libertarians. God help us, we would actually have to cooperate with ourselves. That's probably too big of a lift. But that's how you're going to get it done. And I think there's a lot of opportunities on foreign policy and defense spending and the security industrial complex. And certainly, the RFK Nicole Shanahan MAHA agenda, when he talks about corporate capture, I so want to remind everybody that as long as the government is choosing winners and losers, looters and losers is probably a different way to say that, the big corporations are going to game the system. So you have to unwind it by shifting power back to local governance and families.
Absolutely. The current iteration of the Libertarian Party, as I said earlier, is the most interesting I've seen in my lifetime, just because they're embracing the idea that coalition building is something you should do. When I was with Ron Paul in 2012, working for his campaign or even for his son later, as somebody who voted for libertarian candidates for president, I always thought it was stupid that a libertarian would run against Thomas Massie or anybody that good. But there were libertarians well, he's a Republican, we got to put somebody up. And I was just thought that was so self-defeating. This new idea where you have a presidential candidate, and I think the Libertarian Party always should, as well as many other candidates at many different levels. That's what they should have their own candidates. But the idea that you should work with either of the major parties in the Obama era, it might have been the Democrats. In this era, it's the Republicans and what's going on with Trump. that's a good idea, especially if it bears fruit and you have power as a libertarian to see things you want to happen. You just mentioned foreign policy. I decided to vote for Trump around the time Israel retaliated for October 7th, which it absolutely should have. It was a terrorist attack on Israel by Hamas. And I had a bad feeling about what that was going to look like, and it quickly became that. And so they asked Joe Biden, who was the Democratic nominee at the time, what would you do? And he's like, I stand with Israel, blah, 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 and whatever. And they asked Donald Trump, this was the first comments he had about it, and he said, we need to stop the killing. The deaths need to end. It wasn't about if Israel was right or Palestine, it was just that, which is the most humane thing you could say. To this day, and we saw this with the Arab American vote in Dearborn, Michigan last night, he's not anti-Israel. He's pro-Israel. If you look at that Madison Square Garden rally, I mean, so many Jewish speakers and supporters. But at the same time, he recognizes that there's been overreach in Gaza to a deadly degree and talked to Arab American voters about that. That's what I want. That's what Kamala Harris was not. And if she was, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney wouldn't have been there. I think reasonable libertarians who are anti-war, that's what they would want too. I don't want some anti-Semitic a-hole at some anti-Israel protest on some campus that really hates Jews. I'm not on that person's side. I don't like those people at all. I think they're terrible. Anti-Semitism's terrible. Racism's terrible. But we should be able to talk about this issue without being portrayed as that. And Trump is a pretty good example of that so far. As a libertarian, the Libertarian Party, yeah, why wouldn't I want to work with that and see if we can make some progress on foreign policy from a United States perspective and stop funding things that we shouldn't be funding morally and stop being involved in wars, whether, Ukraine, funding that. We should be involved morally. And if Trump's the vessel for that, then, yeah, I'm for that.
As you know, I was a Gary Johnson guy in 2016, having, prior to that, run a Rand Paul for president super PAC. And so when Rand pulled out, we moved over to Gary Johnson. And one of my concerns at the time was Trump's temperament. And you remember all of us debating this at the time. Is this guy going to get us into a war because he's got this belligerent attitude about things? And I've come to understand, and I hope that this is true, and I hope that it continues to be true, that bluster is a negotiating tactic.
Yes.
And that he probably does have, if he wants to, he has the ability to go to Netanyahu now and say the killing has to stop. I can't imagine a world where Kamala Harris would do such a thing.
No.
And again, maybe I'm being romantic, and maybe I'm all wrong, but I do know that the killing has to stop, and that's what I'm hopeful for. But before we wrap up, I do want to talk about not so much Chase Oliver. It looks like he is the numbers I'm looking at this morning is he's going to get less than half of the vote that the candidate did in the last cycle. Why am I blanking? Joe Jorgensen. And he is blaming lack of support for the party. I don't think that's really what happened at all. I think what happened was that we had libertarians had two major candidates that were in the mix. Dave Smith, you already mentioned, who I thought would have been a fantastic candidate. Justin Amash, who also would have been a fantastic candidate. Candidates of substantial influence and reach and record and great presenters of libertarian ideas in different ways, different candidates. And after that didn't happen, and watching what the Democratic Party did to RFK Jr., after having watched what they did to Tulsi Gabbard, after having watched what the Republican Party did to Ron Paul, you can look at a lot of different scenarios, but I think we have to have sort of a come to Jesus moment and wonder, figure out what we're trying to do with third parties and whether or not that's a meaningful thing to do. I think as influencing ideas and turning people on the way that Ron Paul would put those little Easter eggs about Austrian economics and Ludwig von Mises in his campaign speeches, to me that soapbox is a compelling reason to have a candidate in the mix. But it does seem to me that if RFK can't do it with the kind of money and juice and stature that he had, I'm not sure what we're doing.
Agree. Two things. Let's start with this. I don't think this election was a referendum on Chase Oliver and his efforts at all. I think he fought hard and he should be proud of everything he did, as should everybody who voted for him. This was a completely different dynamic than any election I've experienced in my lifetime, especially for where libertarians and their preferences might go. So I think that's unfair for anybody to put this on him as like, oh, you ran a bad campaign or something. I don't think that at all, and I voted for Donald Trump. Like, let me just put that out there. As far as what third parties can do, once again, I think what the LP has attempted to do in this election, we'll see what the results are, by using the small leverage that we libertarians have to produce libertarian results through one of the major parties, is brilliant. And I've been in favor of that for years and years and thought that the people in charge would never going to try anything like that. Yet here we are. I would say to Jill Stein voters, who I respect, who did not vote for Kamala Harris for war and peace reasons, hey, maybe if you read let's say if this happened in this campaign, it would be future campaigns because this election's over. But you said, all right, Kamala Harris, we're going to talk to these Arab American voters that you've ignored. And if you give us some concessions that you might do something to stop the killing there, to work towards diplomacy there, we'll encourage them to vote for you, which is what the LP did for Trump. I wouldn't be mad at that. I wouldn't be mad at that at all. That's using the small power that Green Party voters have to influence something bigger that they want in the election. And yeah, Matt, I'm the same boat as you. As somebody who's perpetually voted third party, let's face it, as a matter of conscience, year after year, election after election, I'm kind of excited by seeing maybe something that bears fruit from a third party perspective. And I hope that's what happened in this election.
Final thought I want to get your reaction to. It strikes me that, and I think a lot of us libertarians have always rejected the left-right spectrum as a mythology that you're taught in government school that never really makes any sense, because Pol Pot and Adolf Hitler, supposedly on the furthest ends of that spectrum, are basically the same guy, racist, violent authoritarians. And I think there's been a political realignment that's happening that's very much driven by a lot of these former people. And you start with Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, all these guys that would have identified themselves as being on the left, when in fact what they are is anti-authoritarian. And I think the better way to look at the political landscape in the United States today is, are you an authoritarian? Maybe it's a right authoritarian, maybe it's a left authoritarian, or are you in favor of free speech, in favor of bodily autonomy, in favor of workers having the right to work without being deemed non-essential, in favor of basic American values about freedom and your right to pursue your life as you see fit, as long as you don't hurt people or take their stuff? I think that's what's going on. And that, does that manifest itself in a third party? Maybe. Does it manifest itself in a fundamental realignment of one of the existing parties, the way that we saw with the party of Abraham Lincoln emerging as a different party? I don't know, but I find hope. I'm white-pilled by this resistance rising up that is questioning government power. And I feel like if the libertarians aren't part of that, we have missed one of the biggest opportunities I've seen.
I'm right there with you. The opposite of libertarian is authoritarian, and that can have right or left manifestations. I see the same things you do. You were there with the Tea Party, as was I, and I saw a lot of similarities between the Tea Party and the Occupy Wall Street movement. One was left, one was right, but they were both against elites and corporate types and people in power screwing them over. I think that's what we see now. A lot of people saw resistance to that in Donald Trump and voted accordingly. A lot of people saw a continuation of that in Kamala Harris and voted accordingly, or voted against that accordingly. I'm white-pilled too. I see a lot of opportunities. I see a lot of people having the right feelings for the right reasons, even if they're confused about what to do, who to listen to, what to say, how to vote. That's okay. We're all human beings, but their intentions and their reasons are correct. Their gut is correct. And yeah, I am very optimistic about what happens over the next 4 years and even beyond, what that legacy could be if it turns out in the positive waves that we hope for.
Cool. Let's check in 2025 and see how foolish we look. See how foolish we look today. But tell me if people want to get the immeasurable wisdom of Jack Hunter, what's the best way to follow you and find your work?
You can have home base is BasedPolitics, which is based-politics.com. You can find me at Jack Hunter 74 on X, and you can find me at Jack W Hunter 74 on Facebook and TikTok. So I'm in all those places, write for the Washington Conservative, Washington Examiner, American Conservative, and all sorts of other things.
All right, cool, Jack. I appreciate you doing this. I don't know if you're gonna get a nap this afternoon, but you earned one. So
always good to talk to you, man.
All right, good to talk to you as well. Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.